Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Sebbing. Today we're going to be talking through how I quilted Ladies Chain, which is the latest pattern release in our Stashin with Stephanie Club. If you're not a member, you should definitely check it out. Now is a great time to join because you won't have to wait very long before you get your first bundle in the middle of March. We send you 10 fat quarters for $29.99 plus shipping. You get a free pattern every month plus access to the patterns that we've released previously as part of the club. And right now it's a $252 value right when you join. You can download those as soon as we send you the coupon code. It usually takes about a day. And then you get exclusive discounts and first dibs on getting fabric. So our current subscribers already have this bundle. They got first dibs on getting additional fabric so they could get everything they needed to make this quilt kit. And then a lot of times things have been selling out. So that first dibs is really, really important because like last month, for example, by the time I filmed this video, we were almost sold out of everything. And that is the case too this month with yardage. The yardage behind me needs to be cut up almost as soon as I'm done filming. So we're going to talk through this. You can sign up for that, by the way, at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. You also get a discount on my book, Fat Quarter Workshop, which contains our most popular Stashin with Stephanie patterns plus 2 exclusives. And all those 12 patterns are now only available in that book. You can get it from us and I'll sign it for you, or you can get it on Amazon. It has been one of the top sellers over there. You support us a little more if you get it straight from us, but I know a lot of times it's easier to just add to cart and get it in 2 days with Amazon, but we sign it, so you know that's fun. All right, now back to the quilting. So we're going to talk a little bit about Rulerwork in this video. I use my 4-in-1 ruler by Natalia Bonner. This was the first ruler she came out with. It is like my ride or die ruler. I use it all the time. It's got a great curve, which we haven't shown yet, but we will be showing in an upcoming video. And then it has the nice straight edge on this side, and there are some nice lines, and you'll see how I use those today in order to create some really cool designs on here. So one thing that my video editor was suggesting I talk about, and what I was going to talk about for sure when we started this video, was how I make some decisions about quilting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that before we get into the how-to section of the video. So you can see that what I've done here is I have created a bunch of diagonals going through the big squares, the print squares, and then I have some just straight lines going through all the background. And I did that for 2 reasons. One, this was a really simple quilt to put together. It was super fast because it's almost all strip piecing, and if you want to watch the video tutorial on that, we have that available for you. So I wanted to elevate it a little bit by doing something a little fancier with the quilting to help make it a little bit more dramatic, give it a little extra something than you would get if you did just an all-over quilting design. The other thing I wanted to do was help separate my print squares from my background squares by quilting them differently. So by doing diagonal lines in my print squares and nice straight lines just to kind of help outline the background, I was really able to do that and set that off with the texture. We'll also talk just a little bit about thread choice here. So the first one I started with was quilting the print squares. That's because there's a little bit more real estate in the print squares than there are in the background squares. So I wanted to do this in 2 passes. In first pass, I did entirely with the print square, so that way I didn't have to change threads every single row. I could just go straight down, and then I just went back up doing the background squares with the white. So I initially chose this color. It's the Glide Thread by Haben Dash, and it's Robin Egg, and I thought I would really like this, and I did in some of the squares. I really liked it, and anything that had blue in it, because it really just accentuated and looked good with this like blue-green, and then of course any of the blue squares it looks really good in. But it looks out of place on the gray and the pink squares. And so every time I would get to it, I mean, it coordinates because there is blue in the quilt, but it just, you know, there isn't enough color mixing within the different prints to make this work for all of them. So what I really wish I would have done was either going with my Battleship or my Cool Gray number 9. Either of these would have been a much better choice because it would have worked really well in all of my dark prints. It would have looked really good with my pinks because those, I mean, gray's a really great neutral for that. We also have some good dark black areas in some of these blue and green prints, and where there isn't, it just would have kind of blended into the background and not looked like out of place as it does with that. But you know, I've been doing a lot of grays and a lot of whites lately. I wanted to branch out, but I regret it. I wish I would have just stuck with my grays. And you can see I only have little spools of my colors, and I have big spools of these. Now you could switch your colors every single time you came to something. Like I could just use the blue in all of my blues, and then I could find a green for all the greens and a pink for all the pinks, and then do a gray for these. But that is very time consuming because you have to start and stop at the end of each one. So I would have had to quilt this entire square, and then found all my other pink squares and gone all the way down the quilt, and then I would have had to switch threads to like my blue and gone and done all the blue squares. And that's a little easier to do when they're more grouped together. I certainly have done that on projects before, but this one, there's just too much of a mix to where I wanted to undertake that, because it just would have made the project take a lot longer. I almost forgot. For bobbins, I just used the plain white when I was working in the white background. That's because sometimes you can, despite your best efforts, end up with a little bit of your bobbin thread poking up through to the top. I mostly didn't have it. I used pink. I had a pink background for this backing, and so I wanted it to match on the back. I don't always do that. Normally I match my top thread to my bobbin thread, but I did that in this case, and you can see it a little bit where I started and stopped and you had to pull the threads up to the top. For the most part it doesn't, but I just never want to take a chance when I'm using white, so I did that for my background. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to actually watch the quilting, and we're going to do a little bit of play-by-play where I'm going to sort of explain what I'm doing as you are watching it, and you get to see my little face in the bottom. We figured out how to do that cool little video editing technique. All right, so we changed the angle of our GoPro so that way you're seeing about the same angle I'm seeing, and you can really see how I'm working with that ruler work. So for the tiny little squares, what I did was I was lining that up with a 3/4 inch line. I thought that looked a little bit better than going for the 1 inch, which I was using in a lot of other areas. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up the 3/4 inch line with that corner, and then when I come out, I'm lining that ruler up so it's about 1/4 inch away, and then you line up against 3/4 again, and then again you're about 1/4 inch away from your corner. And that's because when you are doing this, your ruler is always going to be exactly 1/4 inch away from your needle when you're using that ruler foot, because it is exactly 1/4 inch going around there. So that is very helpful for you. So now what you're seeing here is my path. So I chose this path very carefully. I essentially was doing one entire quilt block at a time, going diagonally down so that I could start and stop as little as possible. So you can see I'm working my way down and then back up to where I started. And then here's the path part. I'm going to quilt straight through from corner to corner so that I can get to the starting point, that upper left corner of the next one. So then I can work my way around again, going back into that corner again, giving it about 1/4 inch from where I lined that ruler up. And this becomes like, the more and more you do, it gets super easy, because you just kind of know where to flip the ruler to. And so here we are. I've got one more to go after this one, and I'm at the bottom. So you can see that I flipped that ruler up this time instead of below. If I can, I always get better results if I can have that ruler below the long arm. It just works better for me. But occasionally when you're getting close to the bar, that's more challenging to do. All right, so here we are. We just had, I'm actually going to pause the video here for a second and just talk to you guys straight on. So you can see that I stopped my stitches there. I had gone all the way down from that top to the bottom, and that's all I can do. I've got to stop my stitches there and start over at the next bit. So when you're quilting this, we'll show you on the camera here. I think I have it upside down. I do. So imagine maybe our video editor can flip this around so that way it'll look right for you guys. So you're going to quilt all the way going around, do these stitches, and then go through one entire block. So we're going to do this entire section at one time, and then you can go ahead and start your stitches here and stop them there. It still is a lot of starts and stops, but you've got to be able to travel, and I didn't want to travel within these seams. I just wanted that stitching to be in the middle of the squares, and then I will outline later when I'm with the white. So then what I'm going to do next is you're going to see me pick up and work my way down the next one, which has the varying size squares in it. So that's what I kept doing, is just alternating between my little squares and then my big squares, and then back to little again, all the way across for each path. Now my long arm, I can really easily quilt one entire 12-inch block at a time and do that without too much fuss or being too tight into anything, and it works really well for me to do that. So that's what you got to really think about whenever you're doing ruler work, is how do I do this with the least amount of starts and stops so I can be as efficient as possible, and also not have a lot of areas where you're traveling over and over again on stitches, because that can add a lot of texture that maybe you don't want. All right, let's get back looking at quilting. All right, so for this one, what I did was I started off with it lined up with a 1-inch mark and went so I'm about even with the corner. You can always mark this if you want, so that you know exactly where you need to stop. And then I'm stitching into that corner. Again, you're about a 1/4 inch away where you're lining that ruler up, so that way your needle can go straight in, because if you line it right up at the corner, you're going to miss it every time. All right, so I lined it up with 1 inch again, and now I'm lining up to get back to that corner, and you can see that ruler is not on the corner, it's next to. All right, so now I wanted to create a gradated going in. So now I've got it lined up with the 2-inch mark on that corner. So that way I'm going to be coming in just a little bit more, and I'm stopping at about the same point. Now, if you're not exactly on that 45-degree angle, it really doesn't matter unless you're trying to have this quilt judged. If you're just doing it for you or a family member or a customer, this is perfectly fine to eyeball once you get the hang of it. I did, when I got started, mark all these though, when I was getting used to it. All right, so now for this last pass of doing the angles, I lined it up with the 3-inch mark at the corner. So we're going in about 1 inch every single time. And then I'm just continuing working my way around, and we'll line up with the 3-inch again here and make that turn when we get to about even with those points. What is important, more so than getting it right on that 45-degree angle, is making sure that you are turning at the same point about even with what you did before. All right, so now here's our travel stitch. You can see that my ruler wasn't quite long enough to go all the way down, so I stopped, moved that ruler, and then continued on. All right, now we're going to the medium-sized square, so I lined that one up with the 2-inch, or the 1 inch to start again. And then we're going to go into that corner, and then we're going to be back at 1 inch again here and move up to about even with that corner. It looks like I overshot it a little bit, but it's not really a big deal as long as you keep in line with those corners when you're doing the turn. All right, so now we're at the 2-inch mark on the ruler that I've lined that up with, stopping at about the same point I did to make the turn. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We're lining up with 2-inch, and even though I overshot it a little bit, I went a little bit past that 45-degree, I'm going to quilt to about the point where the point is where I turn, and then it will look consistent, and that is more important than being right on that 45-degree. All right, so there's that travel stitch to get to the starting point of the next one. And again, this one, for the tiny little one, I felt it looked a lot better to be at 3/8 of an inch, or not 3/4 of an inch on the ruler than the full 1 inch. I thought that angle looked a little bit better. So we're gonna work around, we're gonna go into that corner and line that ruler up a little bit away. And now we're gonna quilt down to get to that point. All right, we're going to take a pause here and just talk again a little bit about the importance of that path. I know we talked a little bit about it before, but it's so important. So what you're essentially doing is you're going to work your way around the block as many times as you want, really. But I was doing it at 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches, and then you're going to travel. And that travel is what helps you move, because when you're going around, you're always going to end up at the place that you started. So you got to be able to get from here to the next block. So the easiest way to do that is to just do a straight line through the block. So then you can do the same thing and travel. Again, this one I only did 2 because it's a little bit smaller block. I'm going to end up here and then travel, and then go around just once for the little one, travel to the end, and then you have a really consistent look. It looks really nice. We created a lot of really great texture here and really helped make that block really pretty and elegant elevate it, even though it was such a simple design. All right, now we're going to take a look at some of the straight lines that we did in the background. All right, so here I am. You can see I'm starting at the bottom of the quilt because I quilted the entire quilt down, and then I'm going to do the white and roll back. So I'm kind of working from the bottom up here. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm outlining this because I want to be able to use this as a way to travel. So one of the first things I do is I outline that. And the quilt police always come for me on this, and you know what? There are more than 70 quilts behind me that I've done this on, and I've never had a problem, so you have my permission to ignore the quilt police and do this. These seams have been pressed open. What I do is I stitch right next to the ditch, and it works really well. And I don't have any problems with anything breaking or coming apart. I've never had an issue. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the 1/2 inch line with the block that's next to me. I'm stopping where I think I'm about a 1/2 inch away, and I had to come down just a little bit more because I hadn't eyeballed it quite right. And so then I'm going to go a 1/2 inch down, so that way I can create that line. Now I want it 1 inch in between, so I'm going up what I think is about an inch. And again, I've got to go a little more because I'm eyeballing there. And so now I have that 1 inch line lined up on top of that line that we already stitched. And so I'm going again, eyeballing, and I've got to go a little bit further. And I can go just teeny little bits and keep it straight. I can't do large amounts and keep it nice and straight. All right, so now we've got to travel. We've got that section done. So I just crossed over right where those blocks came together, where those pieces came together, and I'm going to outline. Now, I like to go clockwise whenever I'm outlining. My machine is not a huge fan of going from right to left. Sometimes I end up with some thread shreddage when that happens. So I try to go from right to left as little as possible. And this way I only had to do like 1 inch, and then I was able to go up and then 1 inch over again. And it works out fairly well for me that way. So now that everything's outlined, we're gonna again do a 1/2 inch away, and you can see that I eyeballed a little up and had to come down. Now we're gonna finish that up. Now we're gonna travel over on those stitches that we already outlined until we're about 1 inch away from the line that we just stitched. And we're gonna come up, stop when I think I'm about a 1/2 inch away from that seam and 1 inch from that line that we just stitched, and then come over. All right, so it's time to travel again. So we're going to travel along those lines that we've already quilted for outlining. And I'm going to work my way over to quilt the next section in that block. So what I typically did was I started on the left side of the block, and then I worked my way to the right side of the block. So here I am, I'm outlining. This is going to be a little bit, actually this is the same block, or the same type of block. So we're going to have to go around this twice, and it's going to be the exact same process as the last one. So there's essentially 2 different types of blocks in this. There is the one where we have the 3 coming up, and it looks like this, and then there is the one where it looks more like a split 9 patch here. And so we're doing the second one of those right now and working our way around. So this is the very edge of the quilt, so I'm just traveling, kind of freewheeling it a little bit in the area that's going to be covered by the binding. If it were a actual side of your quilt block with a seam next to it, obviously you would want to use the ruler for that. I feel like the biggest thing to take away from this is that you can see that in almost every one I go about where I think I need to be, but then there's almost always some little bit of an adjustment going to the right or left or up or down to get it actually to the 1 inch or the 1/2 inch mark, because I'm not perfect. And what I try to do is not overshoot it, especially when it's in like the background where you're going to see, because I'd rather go a little bit further have to go a little bit further without that ruler than be too far and then have it looking weird and you don't have a nice join. All right, so I'm kind of freewheeling down where the binding is going to go. You would want to travel within the whiteness, the white block, part of the block. All right, so this one is the one that is the split 9 patch. So I'm outlining again, and again, you can see I'm on the top there, and it's like rattling just a smidge. I don't have as good a control when I have that ruler on top as I do when it's underneath, but when you're close to the bar, sometimes that's not possible. All right, so here what I'm doing is I'm lining it up 1.5 inches away, because that's going to be the same as our 1 inch in between and our 1/2 inch, and it makes it a little easier when you're at the edge of the block like that. And so then we're coming back over and we're gonna quilt 1 inch away again. So that way I'm 1/2 inch from the block to the side and 1 inch in between my stitches in there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stitch down. This is a travel, and we're going to go ahead and move into the other one. And I just crossed right over where those blocks come together. You would be outlining if it wasn't at the end here, but that was the edge of the quilt, so I just kind of went quickly there. All right, so we're gonna outline one more time, and then we're gonna stitch 1/2 inch away from the edge, and then 1 inch away from that first stitch line, which is 1/2 inch away from the other edge. All right, so I've got that 1/2 inch lined up with that seam. It's right on top of it. Now I'm going to eyeball going down about 1 inch. And again, I'm going to line up that 1.5 inches with that seam line, because that's a little easier at this point than trying to flip the ruler underneath. And you can see there was a lot of play. That ruler was really kind of moving quite a bit, because I just don't have the same control when I'm holding it above as I do when I'm holding it below. So this here is an area where I was traveling, and so you can see, you might actually not even be able to see because the thread is so good. I was over this at least twice in this area, and what it allowed me to do, because this thread is so fine, it's a number 40 and then it has like a sheen to it, is I'm able to go right over top of that, and it doesn't add a lot of bulk, which is really important when you're selecting your thread. My machine really likes this. I quilt on an APQS Lenny. It behaves very well in it. If you have thread that doesn't behave, it can really be incredibly frustrating when you're quilting. So I just stick with this because I know that it works well for me, and I know that I can go right over top of that without any issues. Now, I would not be able to quilt right over top of that if I were freehanding it. So this ruler is very, very critical to having success whenever you're trying to get really specific lines like this. And again, just to reiterate, now that we can see it from above, what I did was I lined the ruler up. I've got the 1/2 inch lined up with that seam, and so then when I get my extra 1/4 inch from the distance from the edge of the ruler foot to the needle, I'm able to stitch right there, and then you can turn it to the side, quilt up till you think you got about 1 inch in between, and then you're going to line up your 1 inch mark with the stitch line that we already have, quilt over, and then move on to your next one. And by outlining everything first, one, you're making your block nice and square and keeping it nice and square, and also you're going to have those nice areas where you can travel without adding bulk or making it look weird or out of place. Now, whenever I had to go across something, so say I'm coming along here and I need to make a switch over, I can just pop right over this, and as long as you have been very precise when it comes to pinning everything, it doesn't look weird or bad. If this were overlapping, then you might see stitches. So that's just another reason to be careful when you are piecing, because you can do really awesome things. Now, I would not have been able to quilt right into the corners with these, either with this diagonal stitch or outlining, if I would have pressed my seams under. And I know that a lot of people do that. When I started pressing my seams open was when I started quilting my own quilts, and I was constantly like having the needle stall or breaking it because it was just going through too much bulk, and I couldn't do what I wanted at the quilting stage because of that. And it's not just me. I know a lot of other professional quilters who press their seams open, and instead of stitching like right down that seam, I stitch just right next to it. And that is how you kind of get around stitching in the ditch when you have your seams open. You can still get the same effect. It looks beautiful, and in my opinion, you can do a lot more things with it. And to any of the quilt police who are losing it right now, there's over 70 quilts behind me that have all been quilted like this, and they're perfectly fine. No seams have popped open. We haven't shredded any thread for the piecing. It's all fabulous. So time to get over it. Press your seams open. You can do some really cool things with it, and you get really great joints. So that is the Quilting for Ladies chain. I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope it gives you some ideas. While I did this on my long arm, this is possible to do on your home sewing machine. You would not want to be using a ruler this large though. Angela Walters Slim is a really good option for you if that is something that you're interested in doing, because it maneuvers a lot better when you're going underneath. It is more challenging to do because you are just doing a lot of movement when you're doing that. But I love it. I really enjoy it. All right, well, thanks so much for watching. Again, make sure you check out Stashin with Stephanie. You would get 10 fat quarters, which is almost the entire collection here, for $29.99 a month plus shipping. We send you a free pattern every month that's been inspired by the collection that help it really show off. So this one, I saw it and I loved it, and I thought, how can we make this work? And so we came up with this pattern to go along with it. You also get $252 worth of patterns when you join. There are all the patterns that are currently available on our website for Stashin with Stephanie that we've designed. You get a discount, exclusive discount on my book, Fat Quarter Workshop, which has our 10 most popular Stashin with Stephanie patterns, plus 2 exclusives. They all are only available in the book, and it has been an Amazon bestseller since it came out in the quilts and quilting category, and you guys have really loved it. I've seen some of the quilts you made from it, and I just love seeing what you guys do with it and how you reimagine the patterns in your own stash. And then we're starting to do these videos where we show you how we quilt it too, and when we're able to get a hold of the designer, we're also doing designer interviews where we can sort of get into their process of how they created this and get a peek into their creative process as well. All right, well, thanks so much. You can get this pattern over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. You can get fabric while supplies last. At the time I'm filming this, we still have a decent amount of quilt kits left for this. So if you are joining Stashin with Stephanie, you are not going to get this fabric. Your first fabric will be a different bundle that will come in March. So if you really love this and you want to make sure you get the full kit, not the finishing kit, that's for our current subscribers who already have this bundle. You need the full kit, and then you can make this quilt at home. All right, thanks so much, and until next time, happy quilting.